You sure you want me to do a 3 hour ride, and then the next day do another 3 hour ride, and then the next day do 2 hours in a gym session, and the next day do, it blew my mind that that's what I was going to need to do to start, let alone be successful.
Hey, welcome to the Bodies Built Better podcast. I'm your host, Jackie Tan, and it's such a pleasure to have you here with me today. This show is all about human performance. Whether you're chasing your 1 rep max or want to show up as your best self every single day, this show is for you. I chat with athletes, experts, authors, and coaches on all the best tips, tools, and strategies so that you can perform at your best. We explore the body's incredible ability to heal, adapt, and evolve so you can crush limitations, reconnect your body and mind, and discover your extraordinary potential. And today on the show, I chat with Paralympic gold medal paracyclist Darren Hicks. From age 10 to 29, Darren loved riding BMX, but in 2014, a motor vehicle accident changed all of that. Darren suffered severe leg and neck trauma, with his right leg being amputated above the knee, and his C2 vertebrae was so severely broken it required surgical fixation. But less than a year after the accident, Darren competed for the first time as a para-athlete in 2015. Darren became a 2-time world champion in 2019, as well as setting a world record time in the C2 3-kilometre individual pursuit, and was named as Cycling Australia's 2019 Male Road Para-cyclist of the Year. He wore the green and gold at his first games at the Tokyo 2020 Paralympic Games, winning a silver in the men's 3,000 metre individual pursuit and then gold in the C2 24-kilometre men's time trial. Darren went on to receive the Order of Australia Medal for Service to Sport as a gold medalist for the Tokyo Paralympic Games 2020. And today we talk about the accident that changed his life, his transition from riding with a prosthetic to without, the training load necessary to become the world-class paracyclist he is today, and so much more. And whilst we talk about the accident, Darren couldn't talk too much about it due to continuing court cases. At the end of the interview, after I concluded the episode, Darren and I continued to chat. And it was then that he revealed even more about his struggles in hospital after his accident. With his permission, it is included in the episode, and at 10 minutes 38 is when you will hear it. It may be a trigger for some, so if you're experiencing hardship at the moment, you may want to skip 2 minutes from 10 minutes 38. Please know that there is help. So if you do need to talk to someone, there are some links in the show notes for you. It was a privilege chatting with Darren and sharing his story, and I hope you'll be as inspired as I am. This is Darren Hicks. Darren, thank you so much for chatting with me today. Welcome to the Bodies Built Better podcast.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
It's great to have you. You are a 3-time gold medalist. You've got 4 silvers and 2 bronze. And one of those gold and one of those silver medals were from the 2020 Tokyo Paralympics, which I understand was a major goal of yours. So congratulations on gold at the Paralympics.
Thank you very much. Yeah, there's always a goal to make the team. By no means that I believe I'd be capable of winning a gold, but you can always dream, that's for sure.
And dreams come true.
Who knew? Who knew? I didn't expect it or believe it, but didn't stop me working, that's for sure.
Yeah, well, believe it. And just recently, you've come back from the UCI Paracycling World Championships. You've come back with a bronze. How do you feel reflecting back on that, and what do you take from that race?
I'm definitely disappointed, but at the same time, I need to look at the the numbers, and I did ride a really good race as far as speed and power and all the data goes. I just got beat on the day by a couple of better guys, so I kind of want to look at it that way, but it's also quite hard to feel going into a race that you're not capable of winning or not going to come away as a champion. So I don't know. It's still one I'm reflecting on, I think, and how we'll deal with it. I guess will come from the next few weeks of going through some numbers as well as getting ready to go to Paris for our track world champs in the middle of October. So
Yeah, amazing. With so I watched the replay of this race, and there's
okay,
two things,
okay.
two things I have a question about. The first thing is you guys are standing at the start line for up to like 5 minutes or so. And the question I have around that is, firstly, what's going through your head when you're having to wait? And how do you compose yourself so you can get, I guess, the best start to your race?
For a road race, we probably sit there for 5 or 10 minutes. For a TT, we actually probably sit there for more like 10 to 15,
Oh
depending on what time we
gosh.
actually get back to the start line. Because for a time trial, we need to get our bikes checked. So we can't actually get the bikes checked until sort of 10 or 15 minutes before our start time. But also from that point, we can't leave the start area. Whereas road racing, a little bit different. The bike doesn't need to be checked quite so scrupulously. So yeah, probably a TT is a bit more um, nerve-wracking, I suppose, in the first years anyway. It was. Now I'm a lot more comfortable. I sort of trust that I know the process. I know that I don't sort of get too nervous anymore. I know what I've got to go and do and focus on that rather than the competition or anything else like that. And road racing's kind of I take it very seriously, but it's also not my pet event, so I don't get overly stressed over it because I know it's a long race and lots is going to happen in the next 2 hours. So we'll just let it start and yeah, deal with things when they crop up.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
speaking of dealing with things as they crop up, that final lap, there was a breakaway and
yeah,
the what, four or five groups. Firstly, do you have a sense if that's going to happen? And then
yeah,
when that happens, you do?
yeah,
Tell
yeah.
us
Of
about
course,
that.
yeah. I as far as things go, especially for that course, the climb was quite steep and quite short, so it was always going to be a bunch sort of kick to go up the climb, and yeah, probably you'd break up into probably two or three groups at least. Um, so yeah, you just preempt that it's going to happen and try and save as much energy on that last lap as you can to be ready for when that jump does happen and go with it as best you can. Unfortunately, the guys that have two legs, even though we're in the same category and the classifications are all sort of sorted that way, they've got a lot more power when it comes to a hill sprint like that. So you just, in my case, I just do what I can, grab whatever wheel I can to follow and hope that they kick up the hill and then button off the power and give us a chance to catch back up. And then it comes back down to a sprint again. So,
Yeah.
yeah, again, you can't stress because for the most part, you can't change what's going to happen. You've only got as much energy as you've got and as much power have you got, and do your best with it.
Yeah. And knowing that the climb is approaching, do you try and get ahead or get closer to the front of the pack?
That's what I did for this race. Yeah, I got to the very front. That way, it gives you the best chance to obviously see when it's going to happen, the jump or the sprint, whatever you want to call it, but also give you position as far as maybe slowing some of the guys behind you up a little bit, and also being as far up as you can when you know you're probably going to get past. So yeah, I did the best positioning I think I could have, but either way, they all went straight around me. So well, it is just what it was, what it was, and yeah, get to the top and just do what you can to catch back up again.
Exactly. Well, I'd love to rewind a bit and go back to 2014, I guess, to the accident where I guess this part of your life began. If you could tell us a
Yeah,
little bit about that.
Yeah, we won't get into too much detail about the accident, but as far as it goes, I went to work one morning with no intentions of not coming home. Unfortunately, I was driving a truck that was really poorly maintained. So I came down a really steep hill and had no brakes. From that point on, I think I had a minute and a half of careering down the hill until I crashed into pole and a brick wall and a few other things. In the process, basically amputated my leg on the spot. The only thing that was really left was my main artery and the part of my kneecap, as well as broke my C2 vertebrae. So the vertebrae has a top to it. If you It sort of looks like a dummy if you look at it upside down. So the dummy part is called the dens. So I snapped the dens off, um, and yeah, stuck in the truck for 3 hours until they cut me out, and then straight to intensive care, or sorry, straight to yeah to surgery to do the amputation, and then I think I was in a coma for a day or two, and then came out and started all the the next part of it,
Yeah.
rehab and the like.
Well, tell us about or even waking up and understanding what had happened and then getting into rehab.
Remember waking up very briefly, probably the next day I would have assumed, um, and my partner at the time was in front of me, and so I had breathing tubes and everything, so I couldn't speak. I just could sign to her one or two because I knew that I'd badly damaged my leg. I still have quite vivid memories of looking at my leg all very twisted and bent up in the truck. So yeah, just signed to her one or two. She signed back to me one, and I think I sort of passed back out after that. But yeah, that's the only memory I really have before all the surgeries happened. And then the next one was waking up in the spinal unit, and um, yeah, started the rehab sort of process from there. Really.
What did that look
Um,
like?
well, in the very short term, I still hadn't sorted out what was happening with my neck. So the first thing I had to decide once waking up was how I was going to do that. So the two options were to stay in traction, so laying down, but I had to wear a brace called a halo. If you want to look one up, they're horrifying.
Is that,
Yeah, so it
yeah, like a
sits over your
cage?
shoulders and screws into your forehead and the back of your head. So you quite literally can't move your neck even a millimeter. So I wore it in for all intents and purposes loosely for probably an hour, and it was probably the most scary hour of my life. I instantly knew I couldn't wear that for 3 months. So the other option was a surgery. Inherent risks that come with a surgery as well. So I sort of had to make a choice to take the risk, and the risks were, even though I wasn't walking at the time, but essentially walking into a surgery with a functioning lower half of your body, and then potentially having the surgeons actually nick your spinal cord and do damage and potentially make you a paraplegic or worse. So that was the stuff I had to sign off on before going into that surgery. Was that I was okay with the fact that these risks were there, and um, yeah, at the time I couldn't do the 3 months in traction and in the halo, so I went for the surgery option.
So that 3 months would have just been you laying down
Yep,
in that. Wow.
basically unable to move. Yeah,
Yeah.
I probably could have sat up, but with the help of people. And yeah, that wouldn't have helped my amputation, my amputated side anyway, at all. Because I wouldn't have been weight bearing through it. I wouldn't have been able to start wearing a prosthetic. So there was lots of sort of negatives that would have come with that 3 month traction as well. So I'm very glad that I went with the option I did. But also, obviously, I got out of it very lucky. I didn't have any complications. So
This next audio clip has been inserted. This was our conversation after we had concluded the episode, and with Darren's permission, he is happy for me to include this into the episode as we're talking about his surgery after the accident.
the day before I had this surgery, I was actually scheduled to have my surgery done. But there was an accident that happened in Adelaide, so um, all surgeries that were pre-planned got put on hold for the emergency ones. And that night was my worst night I had in hospital. I quite honestly, I begged. So Karis is my wife. I begged her to get a doctor or a nurse to come in and kill me. Like quite literally said those words. I can't. Like I couldn't hold on anymore. I couldn't bear to live any longer. Um, I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't shit. I couldn't move for myself. And I just gave up because I saw that surgery as like the only way of getting you know through anything. And then they delayed it, and it was only a day that it was like a day too long almost. But luckily, I just pressed my ketamine, morphine button enough times that it put me to sleep, and woke up the next day, went into the surgery, and then woke up that evening, and yeah, I could sit up in bed, and everything from that point changed as far as my outlook on getting better. Um,
Yeah.
I never really looked back on the fact that I gave up at one point. Um, I still remember it, of course, but yeah, it's pretty full on what that surgery did to changing me. That's for sure.
That's incredible.
Um, yeah, and I know that's stuff that I probably should share more often, but it's just bloody hard to convey the right way. And I have no issue in showing emotion to people. Like I think it's extremely powerful, but um, yeah.
And so, after you came out of that surgery, how long before, I guess, you're up and about
So
rehabbing?
I was only a couple of weeks. Well, I was not even in 2 weeks, I think, in the spinal unit and intensive care, and then another almost 2 weeks in a rehab hospital. Um, but essentially, I kind of just got moving. So I had my amputated side on my right, but also broke my left leg in the accident as well. So I had a moon boot on for the first 2 or 3 weeks at least, I think. Um, so I was kind of not getting around even when I knew I kind of could get around after having the surgery, and began to move my neck and sit up and stuff like that. But yeah, I think I walked again for the first time in October, which is probably a lot further down the track than it probably should have been. But another thing that happened on my amputated side is I had a really bad laceration on, I guess, my quad. So that took ages to heal because I actually had to have a skin graft. Got photos of all these things if you're interested to look at all, but
Yeah,
they're
if
pretty
you want to
gruesome.
share.
It's pretty gruesome looking. But yeah, first walked again in October, which I guess isn't that slow, but also probably wasn't as fast as I would have liked. And in the interim, we just did as much sort of weights in the gym as we could for rehab. So just getting my arms and everything sort of functioning as best we can again, trying to not lose too much muscle, and started to build my core and other bits up, which I was going to need for walking again. So
And what do you remember of getting on back on the bike for the first time?
I've got a video of the first time I ever rode actually.
Yeah?
So I rode up and down my street in November. So I think that was pretty quick considering I'd barely gotten the leg, and yeah, just kind of had to get approval from my doctors and prosthetists to sort of go, well, you look like you're handling the leg okay. Hop on a bike again, but yeah, the smiles kind of tells you everything. I think
That's
I
brilliant.
yeah, I probably only go 200 meters before coming back and clipping out, and yeah, looking at Karis, but yeah, it was pretty incredible to know that it could happen so easily. I suppose I could get back into the thing I loved so quick and without essentially too much sort of drama.
Yeah, well, tell us about your first competition in 2015.
That didn't go as well as I would have liked, that's for sure. So I was riding with a prosthetic at that point, and didn't really understand too much about para sport. I think naively, like a lot of people are, they probably assume that it's not as hard as it may look or seem, but I think that's professional sport in general. So yeah, I had a very naive outlook that I'd hop on a bike and in a couple of months I'd be riding okay. Yeah, I lost by 50 minutes for my first race, and then 2 weeks later, or a week later, I lost by 42. And yeah, promptly decided it wasn't for me, and I quit.
Short-lived career.
Extremely short-lived. Yeah, 2 weeks.
Enter Loz Shaw.
Yeah. So
What changes did he make to your training and life?
he, I still will never really understand what he saw in me or why he thought that I was going to be anything worth sort of helping out at all. But we crossed paths at a classification meeting. So I went to the velodrome here in Adelaide to just go through another in the start of classification for any parasport, you have to be assessed multiple times. So I had my second assessment. Not that I really thought I was going to keep riding, but I went to it anyway. And yeah, cross paths with him, and he sort of said, saw your race, but then also haven't seen you since. What happened? And I politely said that I did terrible and didn't really think it was for me, without looking like a quitter. And he said, well, I reckon you've got a lot more in you. Would you be interested in me writing a training program for you? But the one clause is I want you to do a test, one with a prosthetic, one without it. Whatever you come out of being faster with, that's how I want you to race from now on. So that was extremely daunting to have only ridden with a prosthetic to begin with, and then know how hard it was to ride with just one leg from when I used to previously teach people in a spin class. We had to do a minute worth of one-legged pedaling as a warm-up, and I could barely do 1 minute smoothly. So it scared the hell out of me that I was going to try and do everything with one leg. But yeah, long story short, so he tells me as I went faster without the prosthetic, and the rest is kind of history. We just started training from there as a one-legger.
What do you remember of that time trial, going with prosthetic and then without?
I've never asked for the time, so I don't even know what happened in it. I I just took his word for it, believed him that yeah, what he said was true. I went faster without it. I think all I needed was someone to back me. As far as my mental state went at that point in time, I didn't care to ask questions. I just wanted that encouragement, that person to believe in me. I think so. Yeah, have never once questioned what happened, and I don't think I ever need to or will. Yeah.
Exactly. Can you tell us, is there something about the balance of the bike with one leg? Are there any special considerations that need to be taken with the bike?
Uh, not as far as I'm concerned. No, like the adaptation that I have on my bike is essentially a socket that I would use for walking, but without a leg attached to the bottom of it. So instead, we've got a bracket that attaches to the seat post of the bike, and then goes onto the back side of this socket. So my stump sits in that, and I use that to stabilize as well as lever against. But the rest of the bike is just a bike, and there's plenty of guys that ride with one leg that don't have a support at all. It's just a matter of being sort of strong through your shoulders, through your core, through your back, and also through your leg. But yeah, the balance side of things for me never really came into it too much.
Yeah. You compete in the time trial and the 3K pursuit. Tell
Yeah, the
us
two
the
keys.
difference and why you chose those two.
They chose me, to be honest. I don't think I chose them. Initially, I was going to try and do the kilo actually, because I had a BMX background. Loza thought that I'd be better off at the sprinting side of things, but with one leg, it's really tough to have a fast enough opening lap, um, and then still do the other three quite quick. So in the end, my first nationals on the track, I went there to ride the kilo. I think I rode 1 minute 20, which is 9, 10 seconds off of what the world record is these days. And then I wasn't very impressed with that time, that's for sure. So we decided we'd have a go at the IP, which is a 3 kilometer race. And for all intents and purposes, I actually did pretty well. I think I rode a 4:12 or something like that. which again is nothing compared to what I do now. It's 40 seconds slower, um, but for someone that didn't train for it, we were pretty impressed. Well, Loza was pretty impressed that I sort of held my pace fairly well, and we kind of decided we'd start building a bit more towards the IP than the kilo, and then road time trial just kind of came off of the back of that. Um, yeah, I don't really know why I prefer road time trial, other than the longer time on the bike gives me a chance to use my bike skill to make a mistake and have time to fix it. So it's a bit less stressful. Plus, it's also a lot more of a mind game. The longer race means you really have to trust yourself, trust your training, trust your race plan. Yeah, and also work through a lot more pain than the 3.5 minutes versus a half an hour race would give. So long answer, but yeah.
Not at all. And it seems like you're really good at riding through pain. I've seen some clips of you threshold
Mm,
training. It looks awful.
yeah.
Tell us about your
It's
training. What does it look like?
when we're in a road block. So because I do both track and road, we kind of do essentially have blocks for the year where we do one or the other. We don't generally cross over too much, but a road block would be upwards of 25 hours of riding and probably 500 Ks in a week, and then uh, 2 gym sessions and your typical recovery stuff in there as well. Whereas a track wouldn't be quite as many hours on the bike, but probably longer training sessions, because the way a track session works, it tends to take a lot longer to do the work, bigger rest periods and stuff like that. Um, but yeah, less kilometers as well for the track block, but more intensive gym and power work. So it's all very different, block to block, which is kind of nice. Keeps things a bit fresher.
Yeah, absolutely. And tell us, what do your gym sessions look like? I know you said they're a bit different depending on what the focus is, but you also mentioned before, a lot of core strength. So what do your gym sessions look like?
Right. Well, for example, this morning I had my typical Monday. So I start out with 5 minutes of skipping just as a warm up, um, and go into a belt squat, which is essentially just my way of doing um, a normal squat, but uh, rather than doing it with,
On
I either do
top,
it with
it's,
yeah, instead of holding a
yeah.
bar, I either wear a weight vest and hold a disc like a plate, or I do it with the belt. The belt just kind of keeps me a lot more sort of stable, I suppose. Then that to a split squat in a Smith machine, which essentially kind of the same movement, but I just got the support of my prosthetic there instead of no prosthetic, like the belt.
Ah, okay.
So yeah, so they're all essentially one-legged squats or presses or whatever it may be. But sometimes I get to use the prosthetic for balance anyway. Um, then I did an arabesque, um, a lat pull down or a bench pull, sort of um, like chest movement. Something else for my hip flexor, 2 different ways, one with a cable, one without. Um, and then dragon flags is what they're called, but they're like a lever. So I hold onto like a bar or something behind me, and hinge from like pretty much my butt, lift your legs and hold the torso up, and then lower your body as flat
Oh,
as you can.
yes. Yep.
So you don't touch anything more than your ass on the ground, and the whole idea is to keep your legs straight, your core all straight.
Core,
Sorry,
yeah.
not your ass, your shoulders. So
Yep.
you
Yep.
lever from your shoulders, and don't want to touch your butt on the ground essentially, but get as low as you can, hold for as long as you can, and then come back out without bending through the hips or through the core. So that's probably the toughest one I do core wise, that's
Yeah.
for sure. Um,
How many of those are you doing?
3 sets of 6 or 8, but it's like a 3 second hold as well. So,
Yeah, wow.
which is it's a good one. Look it
That's a
up.
good one.
It's
Yeah.
yeah, it looks a
Intense.
lot easier than it is.
Yeah,
Actually, yeah,
they always do.
yeah, especially core stuff. Yeah.
Take us back for a second. When you changed, or when Loz started training you, What was your transition from the training you were doing at the time compared to what he started to get you to do?
Completely and utterly different. I thought I was training enough for a good amount when I first started out, but I had no idea. And that's probably based off of how I used to train for BMX as well. It wasn't that intensive a sort of program I set for myself. I didn't have a coach back then, of course, but yeah, when I first got a program from Loz, I could have sworn he sent me someone else's. It was it was a month
You're like, are you
straight.
sure?
Yeah,
Have
yeah.
you checked this?
Yeah, you sure you want me to do a 3 hour ride and then the next day do another 3 hour ride and then the next day do 2 hours in a gym session and the next day do, it blew my mind that that's what I was going to need to do to start, let alone be successful. But it was very good to get someone to write something that I knew he knew what he was doing, and if that's what he said I needed to do, then I just trusted it and did the best I could. It was, yeah, it's bloody tough, that's for sure. But
I was going to say,
it's,
do you remember how you felt after that first week?
I think I probably wanted to quit, to be honest, because I just thought, I don't know if I can do this. I
Yeah.
really didn't trust that I was going to be capable of half the stuff he set, let alone trying to do it and only use one leg when it came to racing. That was something we didn't even touch on for the first nearly 2 years. I still train with a prosthetic, but race without. So yeah, a lot of things have sort of come and gone in the years and changed over the years. So it's been quite an interesting journey.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about the recovery because it sounds like there's a lot of training. What do you do for recovery?
Sleep, eat,
Yeah,
all
it's a
the
good one.
all the
It's
normal
very
things.
important.
Yeah, um, I probably don't do as much stretching and foam rolling as I should. That's something I do need to work on getting back into a lot more. But otherwise, just relaxing where you can. I when we get the chance, we obviously have physio and massage and stuff like that. But on a daily sort of training basis anyway, it'll just be get home, have a nice hot shower, use compression, chill out on the couch, and eat well, sleep as best you can, and do it all again
Do it
tomorrow.
all again. You train your body physically, but how do you train your mind?
Never really focused on it all that much, and it's interesting because I'm starting to maybe struggle a little bit in the mental side of things more than I ever used to. I think that's just kind of the years getting on top of me a little bit. Plus, the guys that I'm racing are starting to get a lot stronger and becoming a lot harder to compete against. So I think that for the time being is actually maybe negatively playing on my mind a bit. But yeah, in those first few years, I just worked bloody hard, and it was my way of getting through the crap that was going on behind the scenes, which was like a lot of court case stuff going on, which was for 4 years of my first 4 or 5 after the accident. So I think I never focused on training my mind. I just worked hard to put the crappy stuff that was happening behind the scenes behind me and um, hurt myself on the bike and went to races and just believed that I was going to you know at least one day make it, and just kept fighting until I did.
And you have.
Yeah, somehow. It's one of those things. The first time, like I remember my first race that I won at international level, um, and the reason it stands out, obviously, other than being my first win, was the way that my competitors actually approached me after it, because I beat a guy that pretty much was on the top and wasn't being beaten by anyone for a couple of years. Um, a lot of the guys came up to me after the race and just went, "Mate, we're happy, but we're also kind of pissed off at you because you know there was a bit of conjecture about the classification of this one rider, and they said, we've all been whinging about Tristan, but that you're you're a one-legger. You're in the middle of the C2 classification, and you just beat him by 20 seconds. So, or second, a bit more. Yeah, all of us don't have any excuses anymore. Shit.
Exactly.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
brilliant. I
yeah.
mean,
Oh, I enjoyed it, and I made some lifelong friends out of it as well because we both had a laugh, or all of us had a laugh at it. And yeah, I think that I got respect for doing something that people didn't think was possible, and I'll never forget that feeling. That's for sure.
when you when you struggle mentally because of what you just said in terms of there are faster guys coming around now, do you not look back at that time and that moment, and doesn't that reassure you?
It it does, but the classification is so different now, or my class is so different now. Once upon a time, it probably wasn't that tough to make a top five. There was, probably two or three guys that were really quick, and the step down from that was fairly large. Whereas now it's not. And just this world champs gone, we didn't have all the guys there actually. So I think top five was about a minute or so different, which is still a bit of a gap, I suppose. But well, even back in 2018, I think there was 16 seconds between the top four or top five at world champs. So I don't know. It's just getting tougher, and I know I'm getting older. So I guess I wonder or worry that, yeah, have I got the best out of myself? I don't know. It's one I need to work on. That's why I sort of said that it's not something I completely understand why it's happening, but I need to get on top of and start thinking positively again, and start um, riding the bike like I'm that same person in 2018, 2019.
Yeah. What's changed with the classification? You said things are a bit different.
It's just faster.
Okay, right.
Technology's gotten better.
Okay.
The guides have gotten stronger. The expectation of what you need to do to win, everyone understands it a lot more. And I'd like to think that I've changed a lot of that. Like when I first beat Tristan, and then that was in 2017 to then 2017, 2018, sorry. To then move on to 2019, where I won my two world championships and broke a world record. We went from the 3K on the track was a 3 minutes 40, and then I made a 6.5 second jump and took it down to a 3:33. And the same on the road, we never used to go 44K an hour in a time trial until I did that and won my first world championship. And then everyone sort of woke up and went, "All right, that's the new standard."
Time to get
Um,
faster.
yeah, and they have,
And
and it's just trying to find my next step is really difficult because we pushed so hard for 5 or 6 years there, got a lot of big gains, and saw the incremental stuff even in those later years. That yeah, trying to find that extra edge now is bloody tough. And I need to find another level again to be able to compete with these guys. So it's yeah, I guess that's the part of it that is probably in the back of my head at the moment is I've worked so hard previously. We made all those gains, and now I somehow need to dig even deeper and find more and become better again. Yeah, I just
it's the next challenge.
yeah, that's exactly it. Yeah,
Can you tell us just briefly the C2 category? What
it's very hard to explain.
is it? Okay.
As in what impairments would be what.
Yeah,
It's
because
sort of
it's not straightforward, is it? It's
not at
not
all. No,
everyone with one leg. It's
no, no. So
yeah,
you can be a multitude of things.
yeah,
There's cerebral palsy is one of the bigger impairments within the category, and then there's quite a few guys that are amputees like myself. But the way it all works is essentially a point system. So whatever your impairment is will come with a point system attached to it, or a point score attached to it. And yeah, I don't know the point number or anything like that, but as far as it goes, Yeah, a C1 is the most impaired category. A C5 is the least impaired. A certain amount of points you have will put you lower into the categories. So a C2 with an amputation is essentially right in the middle of the class, and then there's guys either side with a multitude of different impairments. So very hard to know who should be where and what should be what. You just got to trust that the classifiers do their job and
Yeah.
line up and race.
Yeah. And then you do yours.
Well, that's the only option. Yeah.
You said in a video for the Tokyo Paralympics that if it weren't for the accident, you wouldn't be half the person you are now. What have you
Yeah.
learnt about yourself in this time?
Um, just that I guess when I was growing up and then even starting to work and stuff like that, I always felt like I was a bit of a pushover. I was never one that liked to fight or anything like that. I was never one that felt like I was popular in school, so I kind of just faded into the background a bit, or at least that's how I felt like I sort of was anyway. Um, and where I kind of just I guess I probably didn't think much of myself. It's probably the harsh reality of it. And then after the accident, I'm not sure why, but I started to enjoy proving people wrong, and I think that started to make me believe that maybe I had a little bit more, personality behind me, or I had something else I could give to the world. And as a para athlete, you get all the inspirational stuff all the time from people that I don't buy into too much. I don't believe that I'm a very big inspiration, but at the on the same sort of side of things, I do believe that I can show people that you don't need to give up when something bad happens. So I guess if that's how they see the inspiration side of it, then I'm happy for it. But otherwise, I wanted to prove I wasn't a quitter, that I was mentally and physically tough, and that somehow I'd like to leave my mark on the world. And I feel like that's sort of what cycling has been able to give me after the accident, which is pretty lucky.
And do you feel like you've left that mark or you've still got more to give?
I'm not sure about in the cycling world. Um, I feel like I have if people were to look at the progression of the class and sort of who won for a period of time there. But um, unfortunately, in my head anyway, I feel like COVID's kind of robbed me of a few years there of being right at the top. So obviously 2019 was when I had my two world championships and world record. 2020 was the last time we raced, which was in February for the track world champs, and I had a really bad crash in December. Didn't ride very well at that world champs, and for some reason my world record never actually got ratified from December 2019. So the guy that won the 2020 world champs actually got the world record, but was 3 seconds slower than me. So I think if I hadn't have had that crash in 2019, I think I would have probably had a really good chance of A, winning another world championship in 2020, as well as B, getting the world record I deserved to have in the history books. And then COVID happened, and we didn't get World Cups, we didn't get world champs, so I lost a couple of years there where I feel like I probably would have been at the very very pointy end of the time trial and the IP. So I don't know. Paralympics is still incredible, and I feel like my mark on cycling is there forever in that capacity. But maybe after cycling is where I might have a bigger impact, I think, or hope.
Absolutely.
Hmm. Sorry, long answers again. I get carried away, but
That's kind of the point. It wouldn't be much of a podcast if it was just like
hmm,
yes or no.
yeah,
It'd be very short.
yeah.
Looking back over your career so far, what has been the most challenging moment?
Um, challenging moment. I don't know. I feel like the whole sort of going to one leg rather than riding with a prosthetic was challenging, but also kind of happened in a fairly good way with the support from Loza. I don't know. There's no real one point. I don't think actually. It's just been a progression that you kind of have to accept is going to take a long time. Where you're still riding against world class athletes. You can't expect to be the best in the first year or two or three. I was very lucky to get a couple of silvers on my first Road World Championships, which was essentially only a year and a half after starting. Um, but also then took me another 2 years to get that first win as well. So you kind of that gives an idea of the progression. I was world number two, and then it took me 2 years to make any kind of impact and move up the podium. So yeah, I don't know. I don't think there is a singular point that has been yeah that one for me anyway.
Tell us about the crash.
The car crash or the
No, sorry, coming
oh
into
sorry
2020,
oh
your
right
cycling.
yeah I was out for a recovery ride on I think it was Boxing Day actually. So I went out to my parents' place. I live in sort of the hills of Adelaide, and yeah, just came down a hill that I've ridden a couple of times before, but just not sure. I must have been in a speedy mood. Decided I'd come down a bit too fast. Hit a bump in the road, bounced my rear wheel off the road. So trying to brake coming down that hill, and obviously lost traction and just basically lost control. Was going too fast, hit a guardrail, did a front flip, landed on my ass on the other side of it, and I fractured my sacrum, so bone just below your coccyx. Severely bruised my amputated side as well as my sound side. Somehow didn't do any other damage, which is incredible considering how much susceptible my neck is to anything these days. Same with my back; it's not incredible either. So to only do a fracture to the sacrum was pretty incredible and very lucky. But it still put me out for nearly a month of any sort of decent training that actually put pressure through my leg, my back, and my hips or my butt.
Yeah,
So
you're
so
sitting
yeah,
down. That would be,
anything, yeah. But
yeah,
especially accelerating,
yeah.
yeah, out of a gate for the 3K on the track was that's the hardest I accelerate in any race across the board. So yeah, I rode actually quite good considering I rode a 3:39 and what won it was a 3:36. So I was only 3 seconds off of the pace, even with a very impacted prep, which is why I sort of said what I said earlier, whereas I feel that, yeah, 2020, 2021, I think would have been my years to really make an impact and, you know, put my name in the history books. But I lost it, unfortunately, to A, an injury and B, COVID affecting us the way it did. So
Well, on the flip side, what has been the most proudest moment?
it has to be the Paralympic Games, that's for sure. Um, just being able to sort of give an interview and talk to everyone at home and tell them how much I appreciated all their support, from 2014 all the way through to 2021. And just being able to sort of say that, the reason why I worked so hard was to show that their support meant the world to me and that, I knew that I'd probably been someone that really ignored a lot of what was going on around me. I was so focused on that one goal that I let life probably slip away from me a little bit. Um, but yeah, you know, that effort and that time was worthwhile. And essentially, I was sorry for burying myself in cycling the way I did. But this is why I did it because I believed that I was capable of beating the world.
You have said that your goal was the gold at Tokyo Paralympics. So now that you've achieved that, what is it
Hmm.
now?
I'd love to back it up. That's the end goal, I suppose. I don't know. I That's what I have to work out. If I'm honest, I didn't as much as I wanted it. I didn't believe that I was going to get that that goal ticked off in my first Paralympic Games. So for the most part, I believed I'd probably have to go to a couple to get the opportunity to fulfill that dream. So I really don't know. I've got a couple of world championships. I'd definitely love to get some more under my belt, but also have broken a world record. I do have 2 medals from Paralympic Games. I don't feel like there's anything more that I can want, other than to continue being the best as long as I can, or being
Yes.
up with the best. Yeah, you
So
know what I
would you
mean.
say you're content? Or there's still more?
I think I would be if I was to. I don't want to retire by any means, but if I was to retire, I feel like I would be content. Yeah.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
What's next? You said October is the Paris.
So we have the
Uh,
track world championships in
yeah.
Paris, which will be on the Paralympic velodrome for 2024 Paralympic Games. So it'd be really good to get to France and actually get to ride that track. As silly as it sounds, but a 250-meter oval wooden track is extremely different everywhere you go. So it's good to get the knowledge of how the track rides, and then we can start planning towards 2024 Paralympics and do our best to qualify and make the team, and then hopefully get to go back and race on the big stage again with a crowd this time.
Yeah, amazing. And for someone who's completely ignorant to velodromes and tracks, what do you mean by they're all a bit different?
Right, very very hard to explain because they're all made out of wood. They all are
Yeah,
250
exactly.
meters long. But essentially the bends can be shallower or narrower. Sorry, wider, shallower. Yeah. The straights can be shorter or longer. The steepness of the actual hills, of the banking of the corners themselves, can be more or less. The Some of our races we actually need to ride at the very top of the track along the fence. So the transition from the corner to the straight to the corner again can be either very mellow or very steep. Um, there's not one set design for a velodrome. It's basically whatever the designer of that track decided to make it, or what the place where they built it would allow as far as room goes.
Really?
Yeah,
So
so
there's no standard, this is how it has to be.
just 250 meters.
Oh,
Hmm. As far as
wow.
I'm aware, I
Yeah.
might be naive in not knowing the full extent of the way
You're
it's
just like,
designed,
where
but
do I got to ride? Show
yeah,
up.
well, you can't change it anyway. So yeah,
Yeah, well, that's it.
yeah, like for
And
example, the one
so,
in
go on.
sorry, you're right. I was
No,
going
no,
to, for
you go.
example, the one in Adelaide, we have a relatively long straight and quite a medium when it comes to the tightness of the corner. But then when we went to Tokyo for the Paralympics, very long straights and very narrow corners. So you have to lean into the corner a lot more to hold your line and hold your speed. Um, so that it
That
changes the
sounds
way the gear.
scary.
No, it's just difficult to work out how hard to push on a straight when the straight can change in length. Also, how early or late to enter a corner so that you can hold as low a line as possible and then come out of it, without going too high up the track, but also not going and staying too low. Like there's a real art to riding a velodrome well. Um, and yeah, you have to learn the track every time you get to one. So it's just
Yeah.
I think it's really fun, and very
Totally.
interesting. Now I understand it, that
Yeah.
there's so many intricacies to such a standard or simple looking thing.
Yeah. And so
Yeah, it's really cool.
you go there with no idea how it's going to be, or do you kind of get you know what it will be, but it's not until you get on there and experience that you
Yeah,
know how to
exactly that.
attack it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
we won't know until we ride it.
Yeah.
Certain tracks suit certain people and the way they want to ride the race. For me, the velodrome in Brisbane is my favourite one. It's quite a long bend and a short straight, and you carry a lot more speed through a bend. Um, so yeah, I find that a lot easier to ride that track, and that's the track where I set what was once upon a time a world record on. I just For some reason it just suits my style of riding. But yet Tokyo was the complete flip side, and I still rode quite well there as well. So um, it's very hard to explain what you do and don't like, but either way, you don't get a choice to go to the track you like. You got to ride
That's
what you're
it.
given. So
Yeah.
just
So did
make
you
the
know
best of
what
it.
Paris is going to be like?
No idea.
Not sure. Okay.
The able-bodied team will go there a couple of weeks before we will. So it's kind of good. We'll get some data and information from them and come in with a little bit more information. But essentially, you just hop on it and suss it out and
Yeah.
make a plan from there.
Yeah. Brilliant. Darren, this has been sensational. If people want to follow your journey, how can they do that?
Uh, Instagram, I'm Hicksy37. Otherwise, just search Darren Hicks, I assume, and you'll see the photos of cycling and more cycling. Um,
That's how you know you got the right one.
yeah. There's a couple of photos of guys on bikes there. Otherwise, the Australian cycling team or Oz Cycling do a really good job of promoting our journeys as well. Or Paralympics Australia. Uh, both of those channels will give a fairly good insight into what's happening Paralympics will be everything as well as Oz Cycling will be a lot more of us, but I don't really do the Facebook thing anymore too much. I do have an athlete page, but I'd prefer to probably just do the Instagram stuff.
Yeah,
Um,
I'm with you there. I'm the same.
yeah, yeah.
Facebook's died
Two,
off. It's all
two,
Instagram.
yeah, and I've never been a Twitter guy, so Instagram it is for me.
Brilliant. Darren, I like to finish off these interviews with a question that can give listeners something actionable that they can do, or some advice to end off with. And my question to you is, in terms of overcoming dark times, when we face something that we're challenged with, what is your go-to strategy in that moment?
I guess I look at it in a very sporting way when I hear something like that. So I think it's funny, it's my own advice I should probably be taking, but believe in yourself. You know that you know the reason why I went into Tokyo and was calm and collected was that I trusted my training. I knew that I'd done the work, um, and then I still knew that what would be, but I couldn't have prepped any better than I had. So I think I just like telling people to work your butt off because it gives you the ability to believe in yourself and know that whatever the outcome may be of what you're trying to do, be it sporting or otherwise, if you've done everything in your power to be the best person you can be, at the end of the day, all you can be is proud of yourself.
Yes. Well, that is the perfect way to finish off this episode. Darren, thank you so much for your time and all the best for Paris in October and also 2024 Paralympics.
Do our best to make the team, that's for sure. There's a lot of water to go under the bridge until then. But no, thank you very much, Jackie, for having me. Appreciate getting to tell a bit of my story.
That was Darren Hicks. Make sure you follow him on his Instagram and support his journey to the 2022 UCI Paracycling Track World Championships. If you enjoyed this episode and know someone who would be inspired by Darren's story, please share it with them and be sure to take a screenshot of this episode, share it on Instagram, and let Darren know that you loved hearing his story. Thank you so much for listening today. I really want to acknowledge that there are a bazillion other podcasts out there, but you're listening to this one right now. So thank you. I appreciate you. Have the best day, week, month, and year. And here's to a world of bodies built better.